Hi, and welcome to Casual Learning. I'm John Bannan, your host, and today's discussion is about how much financial aid can you get from a college. This question was asked to me by Beth Ryan, so Beth, this is for you. All right, a lot of parents who have kids who are about to go off to college wonder, am I going to have to pay for this whole thing? Or is the college going to help me out? Or, if I have more than one child, how on earth am I going to be able to pay for all of this? And everybody knows that college costs have been increasing astronomically the last few decades. And it seems completely out of reach. However, the truth is that the tuition for colleges are a lot like the sticker price for a new motor vehicle. You don't actually end up paying that because nobody's got that kind of money, unless you live in Beverly Hills or someplace like that. So a lot of anxious, nervous parents are wondering, all right, should I even apply for financial aid? I mean, don't I already make too much money and they're not going to give me anything anyway? Therefore, shouldn't I just tell my kid to go to the cheapest state school there is because that's all we can afford? And the answer is no. Not all colleges and universities are alike. Some are very, very generous with their money. Some are not at all generous with their money. And some make you think they're generous with their money, but they're not really. I wouldn't discourage anyone from seeking out financial aid. Don't make the assumption right off the bat that there's no way I'm going to be able to afford college or I'm going to get financial aid. These are mistakes, common mistakes. There are a lot of colleges and universities to choose from. Thousands. And it can be very difficult to figure out how to pick one over the other. Lots of people use different criteria like how close the college is, what they want to major in, what's the specialty of this college. But there are so many colleges out there that you will find colleges that fit all your criteria, more than one. So where do you start? Well, a good place to start in terms of college selection is understanding where these colleges are ranked relative to one another. Is this a good college or is this a not so good college? Who really knows? Because every college is going to tell you that they're wonderful, but that's not true. Some are a lot better than others. So where do you go for that kind of information? All right, well, almost everything you need to know is available on the internet. So if you want to find out about how good a college is, the first place you should go is the U.S. News and World Report college rankings. So you go to Google, search U.S. News and World Report, put in the name of the college, and bam, you get a link to U.S. News and World Report college rankings, which will tell you where this college is ranked relative to other colleges. That's a great place to start in terms of understanding how good a college is. Now, U.S. News and World Report, they have different categories for ranking schools. One category is the National University Ranking. Another category is National Liberal Arts Ranking. And then there's subcategories like regional rankings. The basic things you got to know is if a college is on a national university list, that's better than being on a regional college list. As between the national university list and the liberal arts national list, the national university list is better. My rule of thumb is I look at a ranking for a college on the National Liberal Arts list, and I add 40 points. And that gives you a rough idea of where this college would be if it landed on the National University ranking list. All right. There's subtle differences between the two. Universities offer postgraduate degrees, whereas liberal arts colleges are focused on liberal arts education and generalized good overall education as opposed to a very specific and narrow field. They're both quality forms of education. It's just there's slight differences between the two. So you go to the U.S. News and World Report ranking list for your college, and you see where it's ranked. And then you look at where it's ranked compared to other schools you're considering. And you can get an idea of how good a college is this really? Is this the place that I want to go? Most kids that I run into, they always want to go to the best school they can get into. And, that's just because it's a prestige thing, and kids want to be able to say, oh, I'm going to an Ivy League, or I'm going to, some West Coast well-known university. So the rankings are important in terms of allowing your kid to know that they're going to a good school. So let's just say you figured out what school it is that you might be interested in sending your kid to. The next thing you really need to ask yourself is my kid going to get into this school, or is this just a waste of time? There's universities sending your kid piles of junk mail every week, trying to entice your kid to apply to their university. But a lot of these universities are way out of your kid's league. They're not going to accept your kid, but for statistical purposes, they like to have a lot of people apply, even though your kid's not getting in. So don't rely too heavily on what university is interested in your kid and what university isn't interested in your kid. They're all interested in your kid, all. But they also have their little statistical, issues that they have to address in order to maintain ranking and blah, 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 blah. So don't get too caught up in who mails you and who's interested in having your kid be admitted. So you got to ask, well, okay, how do I know that my kid could get into this school? Well, you go to the internet. Again, there's a very easy source for this answer. It's called PrepScholar.com. That's this. Okay? PrepScholar.com. So, what you do is, you go to Google, you type in PrepScholar, then you type in the name of the university that you're interested in, or the name of the college, whatever it is. And then PrepScholar will bring up a profile just for this particular school. It's a very long profile. You have to keep scrolling down and down and down until you finally reach something that's called the admissions calculator. Now, the admissions calculator, I find, is the most useful thing on PrepScholar. And they put it that way at the bottom. Maybe because they want you to look through everything else before you get to the good stuff. But nevertheless, you got to go almost all the way to the bottom. Now you get the admissions calculator. Now, the admissions calculator is a simple tool, online tool that PrepScholar has created, where you put in two things. You put in the SAT score of the student, and you put in their GPA. Once you put those two things in, PrepScholar gives you a percentage likelihood that your kid is going to get into this school. So, maybe your kid's interested in Harvard. So you go to PrepScholar Harvard's profile. You go down to the admissions calculator and you type in the admission calculator. My kid's got a 1200 SAT and a GPA of 3.6. And then PrepScholar says, calculates, boo, your kid has a 0.01% chance of getting into Harvard. What that means is your kid is not getting into Harvard. That's almost impossible for him to get into. So when you do these admission calculators, you want to look for schools where there's a fairly realistic chance that your son or daughter is going to get into that school. 0.001% or whatever it is, that's practically the same as saying your kid has no chance of getting in this school. Well, if you know that, then, you might think about, maybe we apply anyway just for who knows. It's like a lottery, who knows. But don't bank on it, all right? Just don't bank on it. So what percentages are decent for PrepScholar? Well, I would say if it's at least 50% likelihood of getting in, you got a pretty good chance of getting in. Some of these schools you'll see it's like you got like a 95% chance of getting in. Now, that means your kid's going to get in. Unless they've committed some heinous crimes, this kid's probably going to get in. But when you get below 50%, now you start, maybe they get in, maybe they don't get in. Where do you cut that off at? Well, I would say, look, anything less than 20% chance, just not likely to happen. I mean, it could theoretically, but just not that good. You may still want to apply, but don't rely on that stuff. Don't rely on getting into that school where you only have a, 18% chance of getting in. You might get in, but chances are you won't. So, when you're preparing your list of schools, they always tell you, you should have, reach schools. You should have, middle schools, schools that 50-50 shot of getting in, maybe a little bit better than 50%. And then you got your safety schools, the schools you're going to get into regardless. So, if the worst case happens and every school rejection, well, at least there's one school, that safety school, that you're going to get into. Oh, and by the way, you should probably apply to 2 safety schools because you never know with the safety schools. But anyway, so a safety school might be, you got a 90% chance of getting in. Well, you're going to get in. Okay? So, in all likelihood. So the internet really helps solve a lot of these college problems. And it's so easy to use. Why wouldn't you do it? Well, you don't know about it. That's why I'm here for. Now the issue of financial aid. All right, well, my kid's got a 90% chance of getting into some university, but the university's tuition and costs are like, $70,000 a year. And you think, well, there's no way my kid is going to go there because I don't have $70,000. Are these people nuts or something? Don't they know that I don't have $70,000? Well, the answer is, of course they know you don't have $70,000. That's why you got to figure out about financial aid. Unless, of course, you're one of those people that has $70,000 a year. Well, then I don't know why you're watching me anyway. But say you're not one of those people that has $70,000 a year. All right, should you give up on this school? Maybe, maybe not. It depends. So, what do? You go to the school's net price calculator. Online, every school is required to have a net price calculator on their website. So they've got it. So all you got to do is go to Google and type in net price calculator and the name of the school and search, and you will find it. Now, so remember this. Net price calculator. Okay? Got that? Net price calculator. One of the most important and useful tools there is in figuring out this gigantic college maze that they stick us in. All right, so you go to the net price calculator. Now, what is a net price calculator? A net price calculator is a program that the college creates for you to access online, where you put in certain financial information, And then it spits out what it thinks you're likely to get in terms of an estimate, in terms of grants, scholarships, loans, student aid, and all the various costs associated with that school in one particular year. So the key to this is knowing what your financial numbers are. It will ask things like, what's your income? How much do you have in assets? Whether those are liquid assets or less liquid assets, whether you own properties, a host of questions. You can do it yourself. You'll see. And it takes some time to know what your numbers are, because you got to look all this stuff up from probably your tax returns, maybe your paychecks, but you got to know what these numbers are. So you look them up, you get a familiarity with your own numbers, and then you got to go through this form online about your personal finances and your students' personal finances. How much did your student make last year, if they made anything? How much do they have in the bank account? And from this, the program figures out what your financial need is. So it determines how much money can you afford to pay for college. And usually the school gives you the difference, whatever that is. So the important thing is, in terms of financial aid, is telling the school that as minimized amount as you possibly can of how much you can afford to pay for college. This is also known as EFC, or expected family contribution. The financial aid departments all use EFC, and from that they determine what your need is. And then once they determine what your need is, they figure out, well, how can we satisfy this need with various funding, such as scholarships, grants, loans, work study. So you go on the net price calculator, you put in your financial information, and then the net price calculator spits out a result. And there's a bottom line. Your net price is $10,000 a year. What that means is that's what they're going to expect you as the parent to pay. $10,000 a year. Now, all schools aren't the same in terms of their generosity when it comes to financial aid. One school may say, we want 10 grand a year from you. Another school may say, no, we want 25 grand a year from you. Another school might say, what's with this and all the money? You know, we'll take you for 5 grand a year. But you don't know that about the different schools until you do their net price calculator. Then you'll understand which schools you should be focusing on and which schools you shouldn't be focusing on, because they're too expensive. All right? So you have to do a lot of typing in the computer and a lot of legwork to try to figure out which schools you should be focusing on. Who's going to give you the money? It's an important thing to remember about these net price calculators is they're only estimates. So the school can pull the rug out from underneath you later on if they feel like it. And there's a form for that. It's called the CSS profile. Some schools, private schools mostly, use, in addition to the FAFSA form, which is the federal financial aid form that anybody who wants financial aid is going to have to fill this thing out online. They'll use something called a CSS profile, which is really a second financial aid form, which the college also considers in giving financial aid. And the CSS profile form, it has more information on it. It asks you more questions. It digs deeper into your finances. It's hunting around to see Can you afford to pay more? Are there other assets we don't know about? So it's really, unfortunately, it's really going to add to your tuition bill, because I don't know anybody who gets more financial aid because of the CSS profile. It's usually less, but don't be that concerned, because if your financial situation is fairly simple, the CSS profile probably won't say anything different than the FAFSA form itself. So you end up in the same situation anyway. But if you have more complicated tax situations, the CSS profile can be a problem. But then again, there's thousands and thousands of colleges out there. So, you go through this process, you spend a lot of time figuring out how much is this college going to give me, and then you finally determine, this is too much money for what they're ranked. It's just not worth it. Okay, so you write them off the list, and then you go to the next one, because there's plenty to look at. There's tons. You'll never run out of colleges to look at. So you just go to the next one. And that's a really important point. Don't get married to any particular college too soon, until you know that you can afford it and that your kid can get into it. Otherwise, just keep your eye out keep looking for different colleges. You can do this all online. It's a simple thing to do. It takes some time, but it's still simple. So, in terms of financial aid, look, there's the FAFSA form. Some of these schools require CSS profile, private schools. They may have their own financial form, which is basically a CSS profile form, but it's their version of it. CSS profile, I think, is run through the same people who do the SAT. So, it's a third party looking at this stuff. But, and there may be other forms out there, but they're all trying to figure out and get a closer look at what your actual financial situation is before they decide how much money to give you. Now, you got to understand, a lot of these schools have an awful lot of money they can give your kid. A lot. But they want to make sure that you need it before they give it to you. Really simple. But they'll give it to you. So FAFSA, we have the federal financial aid form, which everybody's got to fill out if you want financial aid. And that's called the FAFSA. There's a website run by the government, FAFSA.gov, I think it is, where you fill this out online and submit it. This is like a list of 60 questions, something like that, about your finances. Then at the end, it'll calculate what your EFC is. Your EFC, very important. EFC. That stands for Expected Family Contribution. This is the money, parents, you're going to have to pay. So, you want this number to be as close to zero as possible. So, ideally, you want this to be a big fat zero. Okay? But, depends on your finances, whether you can do that or not. But that's the goal. The closer you get to zero, the more money you're going to get. As terms of whether you can get to a zero EFC or not, that's a complicated question. It depends on how much you make, how complicated your taxes are, what kind of tax shelters perhaps you use. So it depends on each person's situation. But generally speaking, the less money you make, the closer your EFC is going to be to zero. All right? So some schools are FAFSA only schools. These are schools, generally state schools, that the only thing they consider in determining how much financial aid you get is the FAFSA form. So once you fill out the FAFSA form and you tell the government you want this FAFSA to send to XYZ, state school or university, they send the information there, and that's the only thing that university uses to determine your financial aid. And if your EFC is 0, you're going to get a great financial aid package, at least in terms of your need-based aid, as opposed to scholarships. Scholarships are often based on GPA or SAT score. That's slightly different than a need-based scholarship that you'll get from EFC. Need-based scholarships can be grants, money you don't have to pay back. That's great stuff. Scholarships are great too, but this is really great stuff. So you got these state schools. They're FAFSA only schools. Their financial aid determinations are simpler. The net price calculator is probably going to be much more accurate in terms of what they eventually offer you because it's a simpler calculation. But the net price calculators of these schools, they also ask about your child's GPA, your child's SAT score, and what they're trying to figure out is, how much scholarship money are we going to give this kid? And of course, the higher your SAT, the higher your GPA, the more scholarship money you're going to get. And scholarship money is great. That's also free money, but usually scholarship money is attached to maintaining some sort of minimum GPA. So you can lose it. Your kid can lose it if they don't go to class or don't study or whatever. But it's also another form of financial aid. One important thing I've noticed about a lot of these schools is, though, that in terms of how much you get in scholarship versus how much you get in grants, they balance those two, and they won't go beyond a certain ceiling. So, you might get a total need determination by a university of, let's say, $50,000 a year. Okay, they've determined that that's your need. This is what you need. All right, and then the question becomes, well, how are they going to come up with that $50,000? And one of the two main ways they do it is they got scholarships, and then you got grants. Okay? Scholarships and grants. But the important thing to remember is they're not going to give you any more than this. So if your kid is really smart, and let's say they're getting $35,000 in scholarships, okay, that's a good thing. But guess what? They're going to say 50,000 minus 35 is 15. They're only going to give you 15K in grants. See? So in many respects, you get more scholarship money, that's great, but you get less in grants because of it. Because you have this need, and it's not higher than that. So the need calculation is really, really important. Some colleges, they'll look at this 50,000 need, and they may give you some in scholarship, they may give you some in grants, but then they may say, you know what, parents? You can borrow the money too. So that's what we're going to make you do. So, we're not going to give you 35, we're going to give you 20. And we're going to give you 10. Well, that's $30,000. That leaves $20,000 more in need. And they'll say, hey, that's no problem. Guess what? Parent plus loan. Guaranteed student loan for parents. Aren't you lucky? You already got paying off your own college loans. God knows when, maybe even 5 years ago. Oh, but now we're going to let you do a second student loan, but for your kid. $20,000. You could borrow that per year. Don't worry, the government will give it to you. Doesn't sound that great, does it? No, it doesn't. But some schools, they'll rely on this. Instead of jacking up the scholarship amount, or jacking up the grant amount, they'll just say, oh, you borrow the money, parents. Your kid can come here. Just borrow it. Well, that's not a great deal. But you'll find that some colleges do that. Not all colleges are equally generous. Some colleges won't make you do this. Some colleges will. And you'll find that out when you go on their net price calculators. Because they'll come up with how are they going to satisfy your need? And you may see on there, parent plus loan. Uh-oh. Well, maybe this school not as generous as some other schools you might be interested in. Important to keep in mind. Okay, so, you should eventually come up with a list of, 6, 8, 10 schools, colleges that your kid is interested in that, meet the financial criteria for your family and what you can afford to pay. A few reach schools, a few middle tier schools, a few safety schools that the kid's going to get into. And you're off to a great start. Now, you create this list and you periodically change it, modify it, update it. New information comes in. Other schools you hadn't thought about before may make the list. Other schools get knocked out for whatever reason. Maybe you visited the school, you didn't like it for some reason. Well, yeah, even though it's a financial win, cross it off the list because it's got something you don't like, and it's a deal killer. And that happens too. But you gotta be, you gotta be loose with who you're willing to put on your list and who you're not. You can't get too wed to any particular school. And that reminds me of another thing. Don't let your kid have all the say in what school they're going to. Get involved in the financial aid because you're paying for it too. And probably paying a lot more. This affects the parents more than it affects the kid. So don't just leave it up to the kid to figure out who's got the best financial aid. Chances are, 99% chance this kid doesn't know how to do any of what I just told you. Don't leave it up to them. You've got to get involved. You've got to figure this out yourself as a parent. You got to be heavily involved as a parent if you want real financial aid. Don't leave it up to the kid. Ultimately, the kid decides where he wants to go based on the list of colleges that you find that you can afford and that you agree with. Then you can give them some leeway in determining which on that list they want to go to for whatever reasons. Whether you like those reasons or not, you can compromise over those things. But you don't just leave it entirely up to the child. Even if they're 18, they still don't have enough knowledge to be able to figure out what school's the best deal or what school is best for them. They still don't know that. Don't leave it up to them. You've got to get involved yourself. All right. So in terms of financial aid, some of the most generous schools are the private schools, the Ivy League schools, the top 20 schools. These are the schools that say, look, we don't care what your finances are. Whatever your need is, we're going to cover them. And these schools have billion-dollar endowments where they can pay for all the contributions that they're making to their students' tuition just off the interest that they make off their endowment of billions of dollars. It's like nothing to them. So don't overlook the wealthy private schools because they got the most money. The problem with wealthy private schools is you got to get in. That's hard. You better have a good GPA. You better have a great SAT score. And you better have a lot of luck. Because some of these schools, they're getting 20,000 plus applicants a year. And they got their pick of whoever they want to take. So, when you're dealing with those sorts of schools, if you got the grades and the SATs, it's a lottery. So, maybe you want to apply to as many as you can, and maybe one takes you. And if they do, you're in great shape because these people have lots of money. They're going to give you lots of scholarships and grants. They're going to make sure you can get in and you can stay there. So those are great schools. But, if most kids don't have the qualifications to get into those top schools, they just don't. So what do you do in that case? Well, you really have to research all the different colleges that you can think of, or that are in the area, or that are interested, that your kid's interested in, or you're interested in for whatever reason. And you got to go in that net price calculator, and you got to figure out who's going to give you the money, who isn't going to give you money. And it takes much more time for a kid who obviously isn't going to get in a top 20 school. But there are plenty of colleges out there that will give you good financial aid and are generous, and your kid can get into and go to. So don't give up on it. But you're going to have to put in quite a bit of work, and you're going to have to get educated on the whole subject, which is, the point of this casual learning exercise today. So, if you like what you heard today, make sure you press the subscribe link below. And if you have more questions, submit a question, and maybe I'll do some more casual learning on it. All right. Take care, guys.